before we get into actually writing some of our own code, I want to talk quickly about what HTML is and how we can actually write it, and then we'll get into starting out our project. And I'm starting not in a text editor or in VS Code, but I'm starting here in Google Docs because I want to talk about what the purpose of HTML is before we actually start writing it, because it's really important to understand why we're writing the code that we're writing, right? And so right here, I have some text in Google Doc, Microsoft Word, anything like this. You're probably familiar with them. And if I go and I select this text, I can make it bigger or smaller. But there's also this thing here that says normal text. And if I click on that, I can actually choose to say like something's a title, a subtitle, a heading 1, and it's going to change a little bit of how it works. But when we have text in our document, and let's just say there's some random paragraphs in here as well, when we go and take a look, we actually get like an outline of the document that's being created. So if I have, it's time to learn some HTML and CSS, and then say we come here and say, what is HTML? And then we have a what is CSS later. And I come on this and I say this one is a heading 2, and this one is a heading 2. It's creating this document structure right here. And while I'm doing this all with menus where I'm clicking around and I can control things that way, when we're writing HTML, we're doing the same thing, but we can't do it with menus. We're writing code that's telling the browser, instead of our document here, it's telling the browser what every single thing that we're doing is, and we have to be very explicit in what we're doing. So as an example of that, if I come into VS Code here, and don't worry if you don't have it opened yet, we're going to be opening it and creating our project and all of that in the next lesson. And I come in, I write, HTML and CSS for absolute beginners, like this. And then let's come down. That's going to be like I want that to be the title of my page. And then I come down here and I say, these two languages are super awesome, all about HTML. And then I could come down and have like an all about CSS. And so HTML is, and I have some content there. And then I come down here and HTML, and I say CSS is, and I have more content there. And then if I come and take a look at the document I created in the browser, I get this, which isn't what I wanted. And it's because I basically have come in and written a whole bunch of content, but I haven't told the browser what anything is. And you'll even notice like the line breaks I'm putting in here, like I'm adding spaces. Those aren't showing up here because as far as the browser is concerned, it doesn't know what to do. So it's just throwing the text in there. I need to tell the browser every single thing of what I'm doing in here, like what it all is. And we do that by using HTML elements. So an example of an HTML element is a paragraph element. So for now, we're just going to worry about paragraphs. Then we'll look at how we can add headings and other things a little bit later in the course. But let's just say I wanted each one of these to be its own line of text instead of worrying about heading 1 and heading 2 and things like that. And so to make something an element, we have to use an opening and closing tag. And to do that, we're always going to have the greater than and less than symbols. So we're using our triangle brackets. And then inside the triangle brackets, I put the element that I want. And in this case, I want a paragraph. And for the purposes of paragraph, that's just going to be a P like this. And when I do the P like that, then I have to come on the other end of this and I close that paragraph off. And let's just delete this for a second so we can look at it. And let's make this a little bit bigger. And so here I have the opening paragraph. Then I have the content or the text or whatever we want inside of here. And then I have the closing paragraph right there. So the opening of an element is always going to be these triangle brackets like that with the element's name in here, P for paragraph. And then the closing version of it, exactly the same thing, but we have a / in there to tell the browser this is closing my paragraph. And so if we bring that content back in there, I'm just going to Control Z that a little bit so we get the content back in there. And now if I go and take a look in the browser, I have to refresh the page and I get this at the top, and then it's making a new paragraph and it's put this next line of text down below it. So then if I want another paragraph, that means I have to come on this other one here and I have to put my triangle brackets and then put the P inside of there. And then I come to the end of this line of text, open the triangle bracket, / and then this closing triangle bracket at the end there. Once again, I can save that. I go and take a look, I refresh, and now this is turned into another paragraph right there. So we have to be very explicit and tell the browser every single thing that we're doing. We want a paragraph, we want a heading, we want a list, anything we're doing. We can't use any drop-down menus or anything like that. Everything's being explicitly done with the code, and all these empty spaces and other things I'm doing in here, they're completely meaningless. They're not doing anything. I have to control everything I'm doing with how it's showing up on the page, with the opening and these closing tags there, and then I can put the content in between for what I want to do. And when we do this, I mentioned the word element. So this is my paragraph element. And this element is being made up of the opening paragraph tag here and the closing paragraph tag here. So we have opening tags, closing tags, and then all together, including the content that's in those tags, we have the element itself. And I'm not just making up P for paragraph because it sounds good. P is a predefined element, and we have to use these predefined elements for everything we're doing. And there's going to be a lot of tags that we're going to be learning along the way, but most of them are really straightforward in what they are. For example, there's a time element. You can probably guess what that actually is, right? Without having to look it up. Or we have a footer. So you can probably guess just by looking at that what that might be used for. And while sometimes it can be a little bit more abstract, the ones we're going to be using, most of the elements we are going to be learning, it's very straightforward what they are. And I wouldn't recommend trying to learn them all at once. Don't just go and find it. There's well over 100 elements. And if you just try and memorize them, you get discouraged and you're never going to remember them all. It gets very repetitive. There's a small set of them that we're using over and over and over again. And very quickly, you're going to learn what they are. And just like we saw with the time one or our paragraph and our footer and these different things, it also brings up this idea of semantic HTML. And this is something I'm going to be talking a lot as we go through this course. The word semantic just means like the meaning of something, right? So the semantics of a word. When you say a word, you know what that is because you know the language that we're speaking. And so paragraph means something, where like our heading, which we haven't talked about, we have like a heading, H1 is for our heading 1. That doesn't just make it look a certain way, but it carries a certain meaning with it as well. And it's very important that we use the correct elements for everything we're doing because it creates the structure for our website so the browser understands what it should be doing. But also using the correct elements helps us build accessible websites as well, because people use and interact with websites in different ways. Some people only use their keyboards to navigate through websites instead of using a mouse or a touchscreen. Other people use screen readers to have a website read out to them. And other people use I'm sure you've been on your phone and use like reader modes and other things like that. There's so many different ways that you can consume a website, and using the correct semantic HTML is what makes all of that work much better. And to be able to accommodate all of these different ways of potentially consuming a website, the best way to do it is to use the correct elements as you're building them out. And as we go through this course, we're going to be slowly going through and talking about the most essential ones you need for building out your projects.